Okay. So it begins. Another night of finding a clear mirror. The title is When the Breath Navigates Subjective Realms. And so about conscious breathing, and I thought it would be an interesting episode, guys, to share certain incidents, certain experiences that I've gone through where it had to do with a sort of inner awareness to uh, the movement of subjectivity, its rhythms. And so I'm going to share an experience which I feel I maybe have shared it once, like a while ago, years ago. But pretty much, guys, in I believe it was 2013, end of 2012, I had a very unique experience. And so I found myself by this fountain on a university campus. And I remember I had gone to this, I had pretty much, I hadn't been an ideal student, and I had pretty much reached a dead end in the path I was taking. I remember sitting by that river, sorry, not river, fountain, that campus fountain. And I just sat there, and I remember I had my fingertips touching one another, and I was kind of sitting there, and it was a point in my life where imagine something you were building and then it just goes away. It's just no longer there. So I remember I was sitting, and it was a strange preferenceless. It was a strange feeling of absence. And I remember I sat there by there, and I was just thinking to myself, and I noticed for the first time a stream of, just pay attention to how I'm saying this, a stream of thought. Literally, I noticed my own thinking happening at a speed which wasn't my regular thinking. And I remember in that moment, as my hands were like that, through every inhale, I would inhale. Then through the exhale, words would pour into my mind. Through the inhale, it was like the antenna getting signal, and the exhale was the reception of the signal in my inner realms. And this was before a lot of my kind of awareness now. This is before who you hear is talking now. Do you know? And so at that time, it was a moment where I'll never forget it. It was one of the most unique experiences of my life. I pretty much sat down, and as I was exhaling, I felt I had a conversation that was very long. It felt to me like, how can I tell you? It was a sense of where the information I was getting felt long to me, felt very long, as if you imagine closing your eyes, feeling like you're listening to a 1 hour podcast, and then you open your eyes and you see it's only been 2 minutes, so it was a sort of, with through my exhalation, I began becoming conscious of the subtler details of that thought stream, of that. I see thoughts as not objects, guys. I see them as rivers, and it's like we open a flashlight to them. The signaling is that way. And so, guys, look at what happens there. I remember, I remember that as I was sitting there, there was a lot of content that came about channeling space. It was like for the first time, you know what it was? It was like for the first time, you're getting thoughts that you have never had, and at a fast speed in a row, you know? through a certain rhythmic sequence. With every exhale, it was as if I was turning the page of the book, do you know? And with attention to exhale. Now I'll get into later on in this talk what how I found a way to kind of towards conscious breathing and its value. But I just want to say, as I was there, I remember at the end of it, suddenly there was in the last exhale I had there, in that conscious exhale, in that moment, there came this instruction from that thought stream. And the thought, everything the thought stream had told me, it told me to go open page 85 of a certain specific book. You know, I remember the exact title, but it was a book I had never opened on my shelf. It was new. Literally, the pages hadn't opened. And I go open, I get home quickly, I open that page, and I'm like, no way, no way, no way. And I opened the page, and exactly the concept and everything discussed was there. Do you know? And so it's as if, like, you know, our minds are strangely in heaven, but our bodies can't realize it, you know, if we only see the body. And so it was a sensitivity to an inner working of this phenomena that is the moment we call mind. And so I remember, and I got shocked, and that was for the first time when something internal to me had moved, and it had precision of the externality before my conscious mind. So it was another way of saying the unconscious shocked my conscious mind, you know? And that was when I began suddenly noticing that I think I'm just breathing, but with every breath, there is reconstitution, realignment of the subjective stance. And that was very powerful, guys. That was an unforgettable experience, because that really opened me up to, you won't believe it, but I'll tell you this, from 2013 to 14, guys, I would wake up every day, and I would literally wake up in the morning, like, you know, my whole, I'm like messy hair, still in like some kind of, you know, sleepwear, and just like there, I would go and stand right when I would wake up from the morning. I had this laptop, and I would record speech where through my conscious preferenceless, there I began to notice the preference of what else was moving in the space. And so I remember I cranked out a bunch of books which are still in the cupboard, um, like still in my drawer, but they haven't been published yet. But I remember it was a fascinating time, because let me tell you what my experience was. You know, it's like somebody on a motorcycle doing a backflip, right? So people from the outside, oh my God, backflip, you know? But people, the person in the inside, let me tell you what it is. It's a navigation. It's just retaining consciousness and being aware. So, you know, it became this idea for me, and I'm like, okay, a person doesn't think about their heart, you know? Are they channeling their heart, you know? Are they? And I realized, no, that's just nature, that a lot of its intelligence is in silence, it's just in witnessing. The higher echelon of knowledge is the eyes of knowledge being themselves. Do you know? Even in Vedic thought, how do I Mount Muru? I can't believe I forget the name. But the whole metaphysical position is seeing that human beings are on the bottom of this mountain, and higher dimensions upon this mountain get into becoming an avatar of knowledge. So right now, we are tiny individual creatures that are like, oh my God, so much unknown. What do I know? But there will be a time where we are no longer standing on the shoulder of giants. Our civilization is standing on our shoulder. That is the collective future, which strangely is a sort of indirect explanation of angels. That the purpose of correction is the self. And that if there was time travel, why would the dude need to time travel back? You know? Why, you know? And I think the sophistication of time travel that movies don't show is that it's an event orientation. So it's like how history is going to be translated from hyper speed, I don't know, like instant, like how can I tell you? There's a theory that time travel isn't possible because that self you were in the past can no longer be. So the whole nature of time changes every moment you open your eyes, you know, or every moment you blink. So, anyways, I want to get back to this. And I suddenly came into this relationship where my mind noticed that something is moving throughout the day that is not per se the object or the subject, but it is the mover of the subject. Okay, and so that is a very, I find, crucial and necessary awareness. You see, because if you have to be a certain shape, you cannot navigate in your subjective realms because it will bother you. Because there, you acknowledge attention appearing, reflecting itself through various shapes. You know, right now I'm sitting here. The object isn't. If you notice, the mind moves faster than the object, than the body. So subjects come and go faster than objects come and go. You know, so this is why a person, if they have a really busy day, it's like they lived a couple lifetimes in that day. You know. Now, this sense of my own breathing giving me access to something unknown was like, believe it or not, I realized when a person goes within, they win the lottery ticket. What does that mean? That means, think about it. What is the excitement that causes the human being to step out of their room of perception? That means what causes you to get up in the morning, you know? And for a lot of it, it's creative reasons. It's like trusting the unknown, going out and seeing what happens. And some people have known reasons. They're going outside the house just like a hunter would go outside of the house to get something. You know, it's like I found something very interesting. You know, I this is how I knew I was a how I was a philosopher. You know, philosophers back in the day they would sleep till noon. You know, and the industrial people, you know, industrious people would wake up early in the morning. You know, and in my youth, I was always fond of sleeping, you know, later than expected, you know. But it was like longer than expected. But it was there. How can I tell you? There is this every person has a system of value. That system of value, there's a spectrum of importance, you know. And that importance is really causing you your own what you. It's like certain subjects have, believe it or not, engaged you in such ways that they become important. For example, if you're a kid, religious kid being born in the Middle East, you're going to suddenly see that what is the kid doing? The kid is looking around and seeing what others are doing. And if the others feel an idea is important, especially the family members of a child, you know, then that child has to acknowledge that idea. Do you know? It's like kind of strange, but when I go meet my, you know, grandparents and they're very old, for them it's like it's not a time to kind of like, how can I tell you? It's not a time where it's as if I don't, when I speak to my grandparents, I don't, they have very Islamic perspectives, you know, they're religious people who are now living in Canada. And when I go speak to them, I have to kind of treat it as if like I'm entering a mosque. And when you enter a place, pretty much everywhere is land, everything is atoms, but it is our attention that transforms the object into subjective significance. And sometimes this took me a while, guys, to comprehend, because I'm telling you, I had the um, sort of geometrical intellectual conquering approach. Do you know? So I had the kind of designer dash conquer approach to knowledge personally. But later on, I realized what is more important than precision or truth is the journey of the one who is looking at truth, the quality of experience. And I realized, believe it or not, we're such temporary beings. Why does it matter that person looks at a tree and calls it something else, and somebody else looks at a tree and calls it something else, and different people are looking at the intelligence of the whole universe and they're calling it different? They use, like, why the word water is that certain word. Do you know? It's as if how can I tell you? There is pretty much 8 billion projections of reality in another reality. Sorry for being intense, but like in another reality. So what does that mean? That means our external realm is the same. What me and you have in common now, most immediately, is the fact that we're all objects on an object. Okay? And once we acknowledge that, what is separating us apart from other creatures? Think about it. Is that we know that we can, how can I tell you? We're an object that is aware it's an object, and that awareness is the subject. Okay? I'm pretty much saying that animals, their imagination is their ecosystem, but man has access to an inner ecosystem that he can, that is malleable to his own definitioning. You know, in 2014, when I started on this path of these talks, I can tell you that I would have many moments where I could tell you, like, I had become acquainted with the concept of meditation so experientially. Doesn't necessarily mean it has references outside. That means there came a time where I thought, can people ever understand me? When the concept of me changes, and there are so many inner dimensions of experience. Every person has inner dimensions of experience, but it's just like we can't translate that means for me it's like I'm having an inner life that is, and before I gave these talks it wasn't being vocalized. Okay, and that inner life was just happening, and then it, like a wave subsiding. It was like well, I woke up in the day, there was a physical body moving around. And then, but there was also this, the what was happening. You can say the mind is the space where the body happens. you know and so when I realized the only way the mind can be, a subject can become an eternal object. I mean, I'm going to get into a Jungian perspective soon on this, but I'll tell you this, that it's kind of like by communicating it in an objective reality. So, it's as if we are living an inner life every day, and that life happens and it goes away. And I find the reason people seek love is actually so that their soul can be seen by another, you know? And that's what I mean, that emotional stability is more of a priority, the emotional stability of the species, than just intellectual precision. More than we need organized books on the shelf, we need wondrous readers, you know? And the world is in a strange interaction with itself, where it's as if, like, when you look at philosophy and history, you see people said things, did things that they knew. It's as if they plant. Sometimes when I look at philosophies, these are trees that the philosopher planted and the philosopher died. The philosopher transitioned out of this plane of existence, but the tree still kept providing shadows of philosophical perspective to those later to come. Yeah, so guys, my attention went to the comment section. Welcome to the chat, AP and Jake. So I can say something like this, that see what path? We're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. Alan Watts brought this great debate where he said if two spheres are spinning around one another in a vacuum, which sphere is spinning around which? So in some sense, to follow a path means to have your attention on a self-generated interpretation of what's going on. So this is why I'm saying the responsibility has to, this is the conscious part. This is why we have an advantage compared to other species. We are conscious that we're unconscious. But many species, for example, you think the lion doubts itself? No. When you look at many animals, they don't doubt themselves because they're not constantly reframing themselves subjectively. They're just being there. When you look at the spirit of nature, the person who is comfortable with just being, just existing. Imagine suddenly, you went to a job application and the employer was like, okay, let me see your resume. And the employer sees your resume or whatever and says, oh, okay, you have years of experience of being content with just being yourself. And the employer's like, all right, you're working with animals, go, you're hired. And what that means is you got to have a sort of contentment with what is here, or you can't work with it. I mean, think about it. Imagine there's a wrench on the table. You need to use this wrench. And if you're not okay with holding the wrench, how can you use it? If your mind is not okay with existing, how can it explore existence? In other words. So for me, I feel life is too ingenious, and the path really cannot be known. It can be trusted, though, in appearance, and the appearance changes. So think of it this way. Just like how you, throughout the years, are changing as a human being, your life purpose and path is also changing. Anyways, so this concept of being content with yourself, guys, let me tell you what meditation was for me. I would go somewhere in nature, I would get a feeling. It always starts with a kind of feeling, like a compass, like an intuitive compass. I would get a feeling, and then I would go to the park and or wherever. In UK, when I was in the UK starting these talks, there was a there was a accommodation area, and I would just go sit in the middle. I'm telling you, I have been that strange person who's sat down meditating in the most busiest places, and it's kind of like that moment where people looked at me and it's like, what is this guy doing? But I've just remained there, remained still, because it's about a return. So the way I approach meditations, I would go into nature. My mind would instantly give me a snapshot of a way I had already been seated down. And for example, I would see that where in my subjective realms, I would already see where I'm sitting, and I would just go sit there. And the whole point of just conscious breathing and the navigation of your subjective realms is all about attention and really coming to terms and to know your attention as a being. There is an intelligence. Your attention is everything. You'll realize it soon. You know, it's the most valuable thing that is beating for you after your heart. I would sit down, and for me, let me tell you, I had kind of summarized. Imagine you ran really quickly and then you suddenly sat down. Do you know how much inner movement there is in the mind? So you got to sit still and silent for, I would say, a period of 10 to 20 minutes, minimum 10. It's not maximum 20. You can endlessly sit if you like. but it's but it's but it's like at least for 10 minutes, if you sit still and silent, the mind like a pond settles itself. I am telling you, there is an ultimate physical solution to all stress of the mind, and that solution is to just sit still and silent and just pay attention to your breathing. There's no meditation, there's no teaching, there's no other world to access. It is as if what you are is here now. Now, let me tell you different modalities of the breath. I have found pretty much, I speak about this concept called the pilots of consciousness. I pretty much conclude life as not being a truth in language, but actually as a instantaneous direct experience in which the attention is piloting, which is their true nature. And what that means is it's like, on some level, yes, consciousness, who can shape it? But on another level, any movement projects design. And so when you stop the physical movement and become aware of the physical position, then you start becoming aware of the subjective realms and how they're moving. And when you become aware of the subjective realms, mostly you are already conditioned into having a preference about it. But when you can be preferenceless about what you are being in a moment and you can just watch it, like watching doesn't take believing, guys. You know, observance, experience is not something to believe, it's instantly accessible. So we are seeking a sort of clarity where if there were books the future generations could read, as if we have explored as a species our subjective realms and found common invisible mountains in our perceptions. You know, and that's going to be a great advancement for psychology, because the psychology we have for currently, I am telling you, it is honorable. A psychologist of psychology, I'm not, even though, like, you know, there were certain psychologists did some messed up shit in the past, but I'm saying, like, if we don't see that, if we have a blind eye to that and begin to realize the value of a system while it's here, the value of psychology is just self-awareness. All your problems in this life have emerged because you were aware of yourself in a certain way in that moment, and guess what? If you were aware differently, the consequence could have been different. So you see, it's like this takes one, extracts their archetypal kind of archetype bound personality into a state where I how can I say it, the non-conceptual attention. You're not a concept, so no story touches you. And because you're not a concept, what are you? Instantaneous attention. Now, when you are instantaneous attention, it's a suggestion that it's as if, what is consciousness? There's some sort of energetic complexity, and it's simply aware of itself. Okay, so this consciousness is being experienced attributelessly to be, for many mystics around the world, it was like they had no choice other than to call it divine, because if they called it reality, it would be different than it. You know, it would be the ultimate encompassment, because what we say reality is an object subject, so whatever it is in an object subject continuum, you know. So after listening to my own breath like ocean waves, that image of the ocean waves would fall. Um, Let me tell you what happens. After some point, the most trusted and exciting component to how intelligence moves in the moment is followed by the attention. You know? Isn't it strange that we look at young children and Aristotle says it is drunks and young children who tell the truth only? Only drunks and young children. It's like after you're no longer a child, it's like, oh, corruption's everywhere, man. What you gonna do? But I pretty much want to give the viewer this idea that we are a known intelligence interpreting the unknown, moving the unknown. At that point, it will be the unknown moving the known, and it will be as if an instantaneous knowing, collective knowing. Imagine a drop, in an ocean. Or imagine, I say this poetically, that a drop fell from the heavens and it was like, God, why? Why? Why am I falling from the heavens? What is this sin I've done? You know? Didn't you create me? Why have I sinned? What is this? And the drop is falling in this darkness of space. And it is feeling it is temporary, but this drop suddenly in a horizontal dimension, it was falling vertically. In a vertical dimension, it is alone. But in a horizontal dimension, the drop enters the ocean. The drop was falling into an ocean. How hilarious. That drop freaking out, it was falling into its collective being. And this doesn't mean the collective being is necessarily God. The concept of God, as far as my understanding of it goes, is simply a shapeless concept. You know, that means most religions are saying God is the true God. Even polytheistic religions have multiple gods, but you can't have multiple gods without starting from a single. So inevitably you can say all religions they start from void, singular, and then multidimensional. You know. So there is a singular truth to all ideologies, you can say. The first line of code written. You see, it's strange. I feel this can be a kind of law for the inner realms, or a principle that if you chase the butterfly, you will be a step behind, and even if you catch the butterfly, you feel you did something unnatural to capture the natural. But if you sit still and a butterfly lands on your forehead, I once had the privilege of a butterfly not landing on my forehead but making a collision with my forehead. Sorry, not forehead, with the back of my head. you know but hey, it was divine enough for me. And really, that's the thing, that your honest self actually is at a core purity, that it's attributeless. It's like this interviewer asked this guy a question, this mystical guy who had, believe it or not, been a scientist most of his life, and suddenly the mystical dimensions of his own experience had opened up. It was like, this guy said, he was asked, like, what's your history? Like the interviewer asked him a general question, like, what's your history? And he said, well, which one do you want to know? And the guy's like, what do you mean? And he's and the person being interviewed said, there's a individual history, I have a universal history, and then there's a part of me that has no history. And the interviewer at that point was like, oh my god. And what it means is that we have the intelligence to see an individual pattern of within existence. We have an intelligence to see a multidimensional pattern, and we have an intelligence to just be and abide as the field of activity in which the knower, like waves, rises and falls. You see, it's like kind of getting to what Whitehead said was no longer an like literally Whitehead was a guy, Alfred Whitehead. He looked at life and he's like, "Yo, it's not. These aren't particles, man. This is a process, you know." And so that was his main thing, that he saw human beings as part of the process of the evolving manifestation of this world we find ourselves in. Do you see? He saw life as a process. And when you go see another great mind, such as Buckminster Fuller, who I consider to be one of the greatest designers on this earth, who has ever walked this earth, he says that God is down, even though. And so it's like we becoming conscious of rhythms, and the most scientifically, sorry, not, science fiction like way I can metaphorize it, it's as if literally imagine human beings became such sophisticated creatures that you went out on the street and there were no cars because cars and vehicles were moving so quick, and there was technology by just instantaneously seeing a tiny glare, like a tiny flash. In the moment you knew like your taxi was here, and you just instantly close your eyes and get in there or something, you know. So what I'm saying is that it's a level of speed where at that level of, you can say, hyper inner speed. At that level of hyper inner speed, you're not a concept. The dualism breaks down. Dualism is accessible only at a certain level of movement. Think about it this way. Imagine the cells in your body were us vibrating in a microwave so much, like way more faster than they are now. It's as if you couldn't even remain as a physical being, one could say. Do you know? And so it's this idea of the speed of a particle moving so quick that it becomes light. And it has to do with speed. So believe it or not, the soul is the motorcycle that the whole universe is kind of running in this highway of stars. Yeah? By the way, anybody listening, feel free to share your vision in the comment section. So, Jake, in the chat section, you say God is the conjugated verb I am. Hmm. It's for me what it is language is honestly like a telescope into the inner realm of another unknown creature. And I really feel at the end of all our beliefs, once we have climbed the mountain of finding that one belief that's going to rule them all, we're going to realize it was never about beliefs, it was about collective piloting of our plane of existence. And that's the thing. I realized, trust me, I went to, I feel as a human being, I really took mysticism experientially seriously in my life. Like it was part of my life. And believe it or not, I was raised in, uh, in my youth, to a certain age, like at the age of 7, I came back to Canada, and I lived in Vancouver for some time. But there were some years in the middle where I went back to Iran, and I inevitably came back. Like after 3 years in Iran, my family's business pretty much moved there. Like I came back to Toronto, you know, And I can tell you that the exposure, literally what my eyes recorded like a camera from my upbringing and from that, from a sort of Iranian Middle Eastern culture, and even the religious component of it, I mean, on some level, of course, it's a country that has not separated church and state, but it's on another level, it's like the religious mentality was a forced picture that everyone was acknowledging. So it was strange that when you mix religion with nationalism, it's as if it is the ultimate survival of the religious conception to a nation. It's like a whole nation is remembering that ideology, you know? And I can tell you the vibe is this, that everybody is just a human being trying to get by. And they're thrown in different circumstances. And in order to be able to communicate, there needs to be some common ground. So I can totally see how Jordan Peterson, when he was debating Sam Harris, he looks at Sam Harris and he says, "You're breaking the ethos of these people," you know? And what he meant was that it's as if, you see, it's not just buildings that have been around for a while. It is also ideological systems that provide a strange virtual reality, ideological oriented kind of solace, a sort of uh, okayness to the mind of the person. So it's as if really we are, I feel if you look at it, we should look at humanity through a selfish dimension and through a selfless dimension. Okay, and when we look at it through a selfish dimension, the person wants something out of something. It's as if they're a battery, and this battery is using its energy and it wants to get something from its energy. So it's like that component is understandable, that most people, what they are interacting with is something they want something from. And when you see this in relationships, this is why most I find relationship problems occur, because there is a sense of subjective ownership, and that subjective ownership is endlessly being reinterpreted every day, based on every new experience. So I feel when you stop owning yourself as a subject and simply just be, I mean, there isn't anything simpler than that, if the ultimate teaching is to just be here, it's as if, why teach it? Everyone is being here. This was something that the Lotus Sutra brought up, that in the Lotus Sutra, yeah, I believe it was the Lotus Sutra, or was it the Diamond Sutra? I think it was the Lotus Sutra, you know? In the Lotus Sutra, there's an interpretation of how Buddha's ending was. And Buddha, at the end, he suddenly goes into this hysteria. And then all his disciples are like, "Why now?" And Buddha says, "Because I have realized we are all already enlightened." Do you know? And that was the Lotus Sutra interpretation, of course. You got to understand, stories echo in different ears. So, pretty much, conscious breathing allows you to be a conscious verb in your inner realms. Yeah, we are a noun in front of our eyes, we're a verb behind it. And so, Whitehead said the process, and Fuller said uh, the verb. You see, life is a grand movement, ladies and gentlemen. It is not something where we can just live in the cave of our own stories for too long. The civilization, human beings, they have gone through a lot of dualistic frameworks, and now we are reaching the polishing of the eyes of civilization. You know, I remember the first poetic book I ever wrote in this life was called The Polished Ones, and it was this notion that the human being had found a way to no longer resist the world to extract consequence, but to not resist it. Let me tell you what it's like. It's like the world is becoming a field, one mental field, and either technologically we're going to get to it, or naturally we're going to return to it. What does that mean? That means it's not just an oscillation of belief systems. It's not that, like, back in the day, the world, it was the opposite of now. Now we're so materialistically focused as a civilization. But back in the day, it was like civilization was like the gods were watching from above the clouds. You were a kid running in the streets and you're like, oh my God, the gods are running on the clouds, you know? So there was that level of engagement. Honestly, guys, I call it the linguistic simulation. It is the greatest video game ever made. And it has been, its programming language for this video game is actual language, you know? And so we in society is entering a linguistic simulation, and really the more you abide by the values, it's a sad thing. This is a testament to how unconscious civilization is. But it's like, you don't know how many. It's more than I can count with my fingers, of different people in this life I have seen where the environment overpowered their mind, so their character, in order to survive insecurely to itself, changed. You see, it's like, until you get to know your own strength, you're going to see yourself as weak, and your own strength only arises, as they would say, it's as if the ultimate, uh, the ultimatum of masculinity was in some sense confronting the battles. That means it's like the war is not over, but you're going through battles, and you keep going through these battles, and every battle scar is not just a scar, it is realms of experience behind your eyes, you know. And so you, in some sense, like the person is constantly resculpting themselves through their whatever they see, through their newest experience. The world gets a new view, a new glow. There's an interesting story that comes to us from Christianity, and it is about Thomas the Doubter, and he is considered as the only person in Christianity to have touched Christ's resurrected, in, incorporeal body. Like, I don't know how to say it. It's like the resurrected body of Christ. He's the only one to have actually touched it. And now check out what happens in the story. Pretty much Christ appears, and when Christ appears to the apostles, Thomas is not there, you know? And Thomas comes back and they're like, yo, man, you missed Christ. And Thomas is like, whoa. And he looks at the room and he sees nothing there. And everybody's like, yeah, he was here, he was here. And Thomas is like, I don't believe it unless I touch the wound. He's like, I won't believe it until I see it. So he can strangely be said to have been more conscious than all the other apostles, because he was going with the truth of his experience, you know? Now what happens is there comes a moment where Thomas is in the room and Christ, the resurrected body of Christ, appears. And then Christ looks at Thomas and says, "Step forth and touch the wound." And so that's a very profound suggestion, that it's as if like doubt is not aimless. Doubt, there's two types of doubt. There's an honest experiential doubt, and then there's a robotic like mass whack-a-mole doubt. You know, don't doubt like as if you're playing whack-a-mole, because then you're gonna doubt everything without looking at it. You know. You know, it's like life is like a math exam where a formula is given, there are unknown variables, and what is also given is certain additional info. And it's like your experience is looking at this equation of exists. Your experience is the and what your free will's engagement of experience. Your experience is we have to be conscious of not our objective realms but our subjective realms, then also to be able to acknowledge how they're simultaneously the mind. So I feel in front of our eyes we're a body that's projecting a mind. Behind our eyes we are a mind projecting a body. So realistically and practically, I think everybody is keeping their life in through a certain dualistic axis, and that dualistic axis is how the world treated them when they were young. Their earliest memory, how their earliest experiences formed the foundation for their later on experiences. And the thing about life is, unless you acknowledge change, you're going to freak out to be something. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't be something, but it's just a system where it's like now the skill must increase. That means it's as if like as technologies evolve, new practices emerge. Can you imagine you as a person are walking in the street. Think of this kind of advanced civilization, okay? You're walking in the street downtown. Let's say you're walking downtown Toronto, and you see a person who appears crazy shouting at the wall, you know? Shouting at the wall. The person is shouting at the wall, or is shouting at a reflection they see in some sort of window or something, you know. And so imagine in that moment there was a phone call. There was a number you could call, and you're like, okay, you'd be like, hello, a human being has suffered so much in their external realms that they're trapped in their inner realms and they need assistance. Can you send somebody? And imagine in that, and the number you called was like, yeah, we'll send an advanced communicator there, you know. And so imagine, just imagine that we did not think suddenly, we did not disvalue people so easily. Rather, we saw that their attention is in an inefficient world, on an inefficient world. And if you, this is the thing, that the ultimate point of all this therapy that is going on in the world is that what world are you looking at, and are you allowed to be in that world? And it's like that moment where the lion that has been thinking it's a sheep is looking at the pond and looking at the other lion, which sees that like they have the same reflection. The wool of language will be pushed aside by the roars of direct experience. We are reaching a very fascinating time in history, and believe it or not, as I'm saying this right now, there are memories of me that are hearing me say this and just crying right now. I can see we have become, after 4 billion years, conscious of this potential. All that remains is the implementation of effort and for free will to care for the freedom of its whole being, of its species. We need that honor to come back. I don't know how. We need some sort of Japanese, like samurai, like kind of orators to kind of go out into the world and be like, honor the civilization. You know, like some sort of return back to the value of your species. That means if there was an alien attack right now, you know, and you suddenly found another human being, you would not be caring about race, color, and all this. Do you know? You would not be caring about all the endless ability of the mind to create differences between one another. You know, you would see that, whoa, it's my species. I have found my species. You know. The concept of the advanced communicator is really how your intelligence is advanced, and if you choose to communicate, oh my god, it's advanced communication. For some reason, I get a feeling if I should ask the audience if they have any question about what I've said so far. Okay, let's keep going. A candle flame flickers. The cosmos finds itself to be subjectively a shadow. You know, I feel it's like there's one level, yeah, renounce the illusion and kind of rest and sit still and silent and find your true self. But there's another way of where it's as if it's like you see, you think you're separate from the world. That's why you feel there's still a separate enlightenment into a magical dimension or something. You know, that is not the case, I find. I find what it is that there will come a point where the attention in the moment will realize its inseparability with all phenomenology just in that awareness. So it's kind of realizing you are an object among all the other objects. It's like, why is this stardust that is being me more important than the stardust that is being that rock? Do you know, on a material level, we are so equal. We're all just atoms. Like, who are we judging? But on another level, do you see, we have the sophistication of the imposition of meaning. So I find the mind from another dimension is moving the body in this dimension. This is why the mind feels the whole moment is its observance. And now, what does this mean? This can potentially suggest that, whoa, whoa, whoa. Have we gotten bored of temporary life, and now the mind automatically has moved into a sort of its own eternalhood? In my childhood, uh, I developed a very interesting relationship with the unknown, in the sense that from a young age, I was thinking of the concept of sin had entered my mind, and I was conscious of it. So it was as if, like, you know what it is? It's like a person has this uncomfortable experience, wants to get out of that discomfort, and they look at the first way out, and whatever is there is their way out, you know? And so they begin inhabiting a sort of story to the moment, and I'm saying that one of the early stories to my moment that I was inhabiting was one where I felt that there is the mystery of the world had not been shaped yet for me that much. And so there was a sense of ambience of the unknown is alive, not just what is in the known. And I was afraid of the dark. This was like when I was very young, and I saw this film Signs or something. And both me and my brother were afraid of the dark after that. But then we went to my mother, and she was at the time, you know, more religiously inclined, and she was praying. And after me and my brother went to my mother, and we're like, okay, what should we do? And she said, just say the name of God, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And it was this thing where it was like a program given that brought solace. And I remember I was in this mantra saying, you don't know how many, like it's like even I've been drinking at like I've been at certain parties, but I've still been saying mantras, do you know? And so here's the thing, guys. It was a sort of way where my younger psychology, the archetype I was living in that moment, the sense of self I had, it couldn't really look at the situation and realize there's so much even beauty to the darkness. You know, there is like beauty in everything in this life. So what does that mean? It's as if like what I thought was chaos, it's not because of you. So I realized that it's like the religious conception, or you can say the religious mindset or vehicle is set in a way where the person can never blame themselves. And it's strange. It's strange. And it's not strange in a way where it's like I don't care. I treat every idea as artwork, by the way. And let me tell you why. Because I'm a person who's concluded that the truth can't be in words. Words are just a technology we use. Subjects are just another tool in the hand of man. So anyways, what I'm trying to get to is that we the body needs food to eat and get by. Similarly, the mind needs certain ideological frameworks to activate itself. Now, when you get obsessed with these ideological frameworks that I feel throughout the day, do you know how much they come and go and change? So, like one's eyes are not just we're not a statue, we're a moving being. That is a great freedom. That is a grand freedom. You know that gets a personality. And this tree that becomes conscious, gets a personality, shouts to God. This idea of God. And shouts to God and says, God, what is this? You've given all these creatures legs. You haven't given me legs. What am I gonna do? Why are you doing this? And God says to the tree, relax. You are the earth. You're connected to the earth. You don't need to walk. You are the earth. You don't need to hover in subjective simulations that have separated you from how elementally you are the universe right now, a part of it at least. So the tree's like, all right, all right. So, so anyways, guys, it's all about becoming conscious of how breathing happens. A lot of things happen. Nature is happening. Our eyes have opened to it. The more we want to be individual and free will, the more we have to honorably separate ourselves from reality. Do you know? That means the concept of honor came with strength because it was an inner authorization to do the right thing regardless. The main thing I'm trying to encourage, hopefully, in anybody who listens to these talks, is that start writing your inner realms. Write at least one book about what you perceived and what you saw as a human being in this life. And with the hope that one day this great archival library of every human being's kind of book will be made. The grand library of names, where it's like you go to the shelf and you, for example, you go see my name, Amin Jabbar Ansari, you go see your name, and you see all the books that this human being conducted. It would be a classification of the shelves of this grand library by names of the people who originated the ideas, who set into motion the ideas. So that's the thing. I feel like we have to communicate our inner realm somehow, and social media is one can say an artificial communication of your inner realms. Because who you are, if you really look at the hard problem of consciousness, we technically have no clue. And conscious breathing, I feel in the inhale, it's like the arrow is pulled back. And in the exhale, there's a subtle silence where clarity is just emerging. And the arrow is released. And the reception is clear. And the pilot has uh, achieved clear liftoff into the rhythms of their inner realms. You see, meditation is too, uh, it's like, here's my approach. It's like, forget the concept meditation. Let's look at existence. Because inevitably our self-inquiry is meditation. That's all meditation is. For you to comprehend that, so many things were taught to you in this life, so many things you learned, but something that no one could teach you is still open to be learned. And that is a new care for how you are being an intelligence on a rock And get this part. In the middle of nowhere, which when you look at the word, you are now here. What is now here is being considered nowhere. That means our meanings are limited to how the data processor or how the mind authors itself into the body. I think that's that's the beautiful. I think that should be part of a modern cultural program. That our relationship with the beyond is through an efficient activity. And for me, I'm telling you, it's like whoever you are hearing this talk, go buy a bunch of printer paper, put it on a table that you often pass by, and put a pen on it, and don't touch this paper and pen. Even for notes, for emergencies, don't touch that paper. Even if you have to write a quick message on a phone, maybe if you really have no other option, then use it. Pretty much treat that piece of paper and that pen as a sacred relic. Okay, and it's like this, like a bouquet of flowers or something. It's like nature, what nature has gifted you through its sacrifice. And so as that piece of paper and pen is there, don't touch the pen either. And only when you get an idea or something you feel you see that nowhere else you have seen, then you write down the idea. When you fight for an idea, it lives on. And believe it or not, you have to instantly attain a sort of skill of, once you see something important with the same rhythm and spirit of importance, instantly communicated. It becomes instantaneous. I'm telling you. After you write a while, you don't even think about your hand. You know, you're just you just hold the pen. Is the moment the idea comes, the hand has already found the pen. You know. So this way you have an authentic, you start establishing a conscious, authentic relationship with your mind. By any time there is a profound communication that the mind does, you note it down, you write it down, and as you write, as you get into the habit of communicating, uh, uh, the one and only uniqueness of your inner realms, you develop your style. And your style is simply how your inner life and outer life, once your attention is on once your attention moves, they come in sync through dynamism, through dynamic rhythmic way. So what it is like having this kind of elegance and mindfulness for caring for your simple existence and also for your complex. Once you're comfortable with the simple existence, then all complexity, whatever failure comes, it just reverts you back to your simpler self. Do you see? So as soon as you can, find comfortable with the simplest version of you. What that means is all the memories, everything that something has any sort of interaction in life where you felt you entered that interaction and you felt less afterwards, it's as if no one could ever see uh, uh, you, your eyes, and if they did, they would be a clone. Or you got to check out. Maybe you're a clone, yeah. So that's the thing, guys. That's the thing. You know. I feel that fear is meaningless. I feel a joy that can't be instantaneous is meaningless. And I feel we don't just exist in the dualistic dimension, there is three other modalities which we exist in. So think of it this way, that Mr. Within is saying, hey guys, we're not just in dualistic, an objective kind of dualistic dimension, dualistically interpreted dimension. There is also a dimension of pure singularity. There's also a dimension of the void. And also there's another dimension after duality, after you as a conscious being, conscious living being, conscious breathing being, have acknowledged dualism. Then once you become conscious of dualism's origin, you reverse engineer dualism, you then return back to the dualism anew from the void. And when you return back from the void to that dualism, the next evolutionary step is infinity. The one dimension is the mother of duality. And the zero dimension, which I consider the void, that is the candle light that is keeping the cosmos alive. You know, right now it may be too much of an absurd concept, but I feel the future generations will not be a stranger to this idea that their invisible self is a collective field of being. That if the mind works through polar opposites, if we are filtering things as good and bad, which is morality and a lot of our laws are based on, how much are we blind to the inner dimensions of the average human being? And the civilization is not built to, it's as if, let me tell you this, it's as if people are human beings that are born are a guest in civilization, but the civilization, instead of being hospitable, imagine you inviting guests to your house and telling them to start cleaning the place and cooking the food and all this. You know, I feel that the world we have to leave behind for the future generations is simply a world where they're like, okay, the world is on my side. You know, because rebellion is a waste of time when collective efficiency is the true vision. That means rebellion may sound cool, but it is inefficient in the long run. Because all the time that that rebellion was being done, there could have been a collective recalibration to a better view. And I don't know. I feel it's a cool time. Now it's like the spotlight is global. That's the cool thing, you know? And I feel we are all acting in our awareness as selves. And our free will is simply the ability to choose the actor, the mask we wear. Do you know, it's kind of like when you go, imagine there's a crowded room, like a party, and you go in there. And when you don't say anything, when you remain silent, is as if you are not contributing to the generation of your own personality's existence in that moment. Do you know? It's like as if you're not building with the tribe. Do you know? And in order to build, one has to dare to step into the unknown. I am telling you, it's like if you get over your fear of the unknown, life can only be fascinating exposure to knowledge. That means on some level, yes, like people have good days and bad days. You know, the weather changes. But when I look at it as a designer, just on a design-based dimension, every day the designs my inner realms are exposed to are increasing. So how could living be wrong when it took 4 billion years to be here? You know. So the issue is how this type of story we tell ourselves and the characters we become in that story and the evolution of civilization. Believe it or not, we have to evolve the values that we are constantly extracting from our linguistic simulation. So we have to realize the idea of a civilization is virtual, is like a virtual reality. It's like getting lost in cyberspace. Okay, but this cyberspace is a reflection of the whole. You know, that means it's as if like it's imagine like it's the kingdom of humanity. That's the thing. It's not a kingdom of a certain type of human. It is the kingdom of humanity, in the sense that, imagine like the whole way the civilization was, instead of so many people. I find it's inefficient use of time, because the head of the snake should turn, but it's like, oh my God, guys, this was on mute, and I was just uh machine gunning words. Yeah. So, anyways, what I was saying is that the inner realms have a complexity that, any the person, as they run laps around the sun, as they accumulate experiences, pretty much you can look at your past and endlessly create a story out of it. What could have been, what should have been, uh, what you didn't have, and so you can see if suffering is being generated out of a character, for a character in a story. So we have to look at the storyteller aspect of our actual sensory experience. Aldous Huxley said there are things known and unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. And Mr. Within is saying those doors are revolving doors, and we're oscillating between the two. And imagine this is the thing. So this is kind of like an easy way to navigate in this plane of existence. Acknowledge there's unknown phenomena. Acknowledge there's known phenomena. Acknowledge that consciousness appears like a survivor in its own, like a castaway in its own island, inner realm. And so the known phenomena it can use as a tool. The unknown phenomena, really, what you can do with the unknown is sincerely explore it. And if you're not sincere, you don't see the unknown. So, anyways, guys, and the breath is kind of key in the sense that anything your attention goes on suddenly attains importance. So, I'm going to share with you certain unique relationships I have with breathing. I think that might be useful. Okay. Sometimes I lie down at the end of the day or just pretty much any moment where I feel I'm overstressed, overworked. And so I go lie down and I close my eyes. And as I've lied down on the bed, I just start breathing. And it's as if in that moment I have no work, nothing. I'm just in that moment, just breathing. And I listen to my breath until it becomes very, very natural, where it's as if like, and then with every breath, it's like your body is speaking to you. You scan your whole body. Imagine like this, like you're lying down on somewhere and there's this like blue light coming and scanning you. Imagine, from toe to head. So it would be with that situation where with your every inhale and exhalation, there's I think instant update and feedback of what the body is going through. And so for me it's like this kind of wisdom of following the breath as it enters the body and begins to have subtle micro changes to everything. So you won't believe how much your attention is behind your eyes a storyteller, in front of your eyes the character in the story. And the breath is very crucial because people said it even in ancient times, that it was like the concept of mahasamadhi was to consciously with your breath leave the body. It's like the person doesn't die in the body. The person leaves with the breath, you know and the breath was the link between the subjective and objective realm. And I would tell you, if you want to, what is more sacred than any object and any subject is the simple presence of a moment where all complexity is breathing. That is the grand vision of life, where it is so vast, archetypes break in the gaze of it. Another technique I would use was a bit extreme, but it was pretty much an over oxidization kind of process. And I wouldn't recommend for people to just randomly do this, but I consider this as a sort of, you can say, modern yogic inspired technique, where the person, in whatever state of condition they are, they just go into like somewhere where the air is good, and they start just doing 100 breaths, just 100 deep inhalations, and repeatedly after one another. That means 100 breaths is enough for you to technically actually not keep count anymore. So you begin after maybe like 50, you just suddenly just be just deep breathing, and it would be a point of doing push-ups for, or like refreshing the biological browser, you know and also becoming conscious of your lungs. And you got to be very conscious to pull off this 100 breath thing I'm telling you, because you got to have a gradual natural pace. That means the first, it's like the 100 shouldn't feel uncontrollable or intense to you. Now what tends to happen, you know is just, I'm just going to share you with the idea. Forget the number of it. I personally can't do 100, but when I attempt to do as much as I can, I reach a point where I notice a total difference, right? So that moment of total difference is the main thing. It's not about per se a metric to give it a number, but it's like it's suddenly just uh literally as if like if there was it's like trying to replicate an oxygen mask on your face you know and let me tell you something interesting. if you breathe from the nose and exhale from the mouth, the air is pushing everything outside from the inside. But if you inhale from from the mouth and exhale from the mouth, then it's not, things are being pushed first back in, then being pushed back. Do you see? And so I'm telling you, this is like, I don't know how much you like modern culture is ready for this, but I am realizing how important it is for the medical practices and medical knowledge to instantly fill out like this. Imagine like a civilization is thirsty, and suddenly rivers are everywhere, where pure rivers are everywhere, where people can drink from, you know. And so these rivers are actually educating the whole civilization on the biology. And my personal thing that I thought, like, probably every doctor would agree is that we have to somehow get the greatest minds and philosophers and scholars around the world, teams, you know, I call them elemental teams, groups of earth, air, fire, water, and ether like personalities, you know. These people who have personalities like this, you know, that accord to these elements, you know. It's just this. It's like there's an opportunity to do something better, and there's an opportunity to do nothing at all. And nothing at all, it's just too easy. Do you know? That's my kind of argument for inspiration. It's just too easy to do nothing. You know, it's boring. You know, so that's why the person has to focus on not just. It's like you build. It's like there's this quote in the tech sector. They say the best way to uh, uh, tell the future is to build it, and it's like the best way to tell the future of your who you are is to actually live and build, you know. To when you look at life as a designer, technically everything is a design, and any design can be possible. So anyways, guys, be conscious of how the moment is happening for you, and what greater teaching could there be. This person in the wallpaper has dived into a totally different experience of reality, and he has held on to his conscious breath. And believe it or not, our inner realms has to do with consciousness, and consciousness really is found, the frequency of the true nature is found through whatever it is that your sincerest, simplest, and like naturally decent self is, you know. Your mind is something that's so brilliant that it's like no one can technically touch, you know. There was the story of this fifth patriarch of Buddhism named Bodhidharma. You know, he took Buddhism to Japan. And I'll tell you the kind of like longer story where Bodhidharma, suddenly this emperor has called, Bodhidharma comes, enters this emperor's hall, and the emperor says, Bodhidharma, come forth. And Bodhidharma comes forth, and it's a hall of the emperor, you know. It's filled with people and stuff, you know. And so the emperor says, uh, Bodhidharma, I've made so many Buddhist temples, and I've like spread Buddhism everywhere. What's the merit? You know, it's like, what am I getting from it? You know, it's like, what's my kingly divine reward? You know, and Bodhidharma looks at this emperor in this throne, on his throne, and he says, all you have done is foolishness, savage, like the savage intense, like all you have done is foolishness. And he storms out. And he storms out where? He goes he goes outside of the palace, and right behind the palace wall, and starts meditating. That means his face is inches away, his eyes are inches away from the wall of the palace, from the outside, and he's just meditating there. And one of the guards looks at the other guards like, yo man, should we do something about this guy? And the other guy's like, no man, he's just I don't know, just staring at the wall, let him be. And so Bodhidharma and the emperor suddenly is like, whoa, whoa. The emperor suddenly gets like offended, and it's like, what is this, you know? And suddenly, instantly, like a kind of more liberated council member of the king comes and says, "Hey, it's like, relax, emperor, relax, man." What he meant is that the way you asked it didn't have merit, not that good you actually had brought. What you wanted as a devouring archetype in that moment had no merit. It was as if your nature was too savage, even though you did something good. So you gotta, it's the kind of return to the inner gentleness. Everyone has inner gentleness, by the way, because we have primarily a silent mode of being and a super still mode of being. That means effort of your mind or attention or your soul, whatever you like to call it, the effort of your intelligence, when it's not being applied and you're simply just there as if sitting at a bus stop, in that simplicity, after walking the inner realm silently and preferencelessly for a while, you will see that it's like, let me tell you what the fascinating thing about the mystical cycle is. You go into it as a person thinking that there are cool, greater dimensions, thinking, wow, there's techniques towards the ultimate state. Wow, wow, wow. And as you really go into it, you begin to realize as if like you're zooming in on what has been exactly happening in this life. And ultimately, all the individual conceptions are seen in greater frameworks, and it is the ultimate dissolution of the inner realms. And so it's as if the person went to get power only to realize they are the power that is moving them. Do you see? It's a reverse shock. It's like that moment where like E.T. man and God's fingertips touching the Sistine Chapel, and then suddenly like a bird from the top of the Sistine Chapel flies into the sky and just like, explodes into blue light. But the idea is like, it's just the notion of, how can I tell you? Meister Eckhart approached it brilliantly. He said, the same eyes I see God, this Christian mystic, he said, the same eyes I see God are the same eyes God sees me. That means the neurology has to deal with this, and I'm just got my popcorn bag, and I'm kind of looking at all educational systems and all knowledge systems kept in linguistic bound, in found projected in language to be alive. I see an apocalypse, and that apocalypse, of knowledge is actually the remembrance of the unknown. And the unknown is what we have in common. It is what our souls are. Unknown dynamism that is the instantaneous shift of conscious perception, I feel. So, anyways, guys, what else can I say about the breath? Um, you have to trust. Oh yeah, trust. If you don't trust the moment, what can happen? It's like, what can realistically happen? Not, it's like nothing. When you don't put an effort, the world, how can the world be alive? I feel that the best way is that the person is conscious of the external environment and all the various ideas upon the external environment, but then the person is also conscious that their eyes is a new paintbrush for this picture that the civilization is painting. Engagement to animate the inner realms, not just hold values of goodness, to actually build an advanced civilization, to design one. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. with every breath, the temporary is eternally reintroduced to itself. We are a field moving particles and particles moving parts of the field at the same time. Much blessings and namaste.